Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. 30 years goes pretty fast. 30 years ago was the fall of 1989, believe it or not. Seems like yesterday. And at the time, if you can remember that far back, America seemed unbeatable. Our chief rival, the Soviet Union, had just collapsed. Our economy and military strength dwarfed those of every nation on the planet. America in 1989 was the uncontested leader of the world, free and otherwise. But as 3 decades later, that advantage has evaporated completely. Instead of expanding and solidifying our power, we've wasted it. And as a result, we're now in the race of our lives against a country that in 1989 was so poor that many of its people could not afford meat or electricity. China. And at this rate, China will beat us. So the question is, how did America fall so far, so fast? And the answer is simple: bad leadership. The people who benefited the most from this country cared about it the least. They were also the quickest to sell it out to foreign powers for profit. That's obvious now thanks to people like LaBron James. James, of course, is one of the most famous athletes in history, but he started off at the very bottom. He was born to an impoverished 16-year-old mother in Akron, Ohio. He never went to college. And yet, thanks to hard work and remarkable skill, James's endorsement income alone now exceeds $50 million a year. If there's anyone whose life is a tribute to America, to its decency, to its endless opportunity, it's LeBron James. In return, he showers America with contempt. Just yesterday, James was asked to comment on the NBA executive who issued a one-line statement in support of democracy in Hong Kong. Here's how LeBron James responded.
I don't want to get into a word or sentence feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke. And so many people could have been harmed, not only financially but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful what we tweet and we say and what we do. Even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that, too.
So freedom of speech is just fine, says LeBron James, as long as you don't do anything crazy with it, like, I don't know, obliquely criticize the Chinese Communist Party. That's out of bounds. It might harm people spiritually. It also might potentially make LeBron James slightly less rich. And, of course, that's the real problem with it. Think we're being unfair? Think that's an unfair interpretation of what you just saw? Well, according to ESPN, LeBron James has been adamant in his defense of Chinese fascism, even off camera. Watch this.
Adam Silver got up and addressed the players, and LeBron James was one of the players who got up and spoke and said, hey, what are we doing here? Daryl Morey made these statements. You know damn well if a player made the similar statements and caused such poor ramifications for the league, there'd be some sort of league recourse. There would be repercussions that the player would have to pay. You know, potentially this tweet could cost the NBA hundreds of millions of dollars, which could come out of the players' pockets. And so that's the double standard that was being addressed in that meeting.
In other words, any American who questions China ought to be punished. That's LeBron James's view. That's what he's demanding, in fact. The Chinese Politburo must not be criticized. And yet, there's a very different standard that James holds for his own country and his own president. Watch this.
That he's kind of used sport to kind of divide us. I would never sit across from him.
You would never? You didn't want to talk to him?
Nah. I sit across from Barack, though.
Yeah, that's the American president he's talking to. Well, if you read James's Twitter feed, you won't be surprised to learn any of this. Quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, he tweeted once. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Okay, well, obviously things that matter does not include throwing Muslims in concentration camps in China or the oppression of more than 1 billion people in China. So what does matter to LeBron James and his friends in our ruling class? Well, the first thing they care about is popularity, and that's why they're delighted to weigh in politically when it's fashionable in West Los Angeles, bashing the administration or protesting the national anthem or retweeting in support of transgender rights or whatever. Their friends call them brave when they do this, which is one indication it's not bravery, it's conformity, which is the opposite usually. The other thing that James and the rest care about, of course, is money. When you criticize Beijing, it might cost you money. Here's a perfect example. LeBron James is both starring in and producing an upcoming film called Space Jam 2. The movie is expected to do big business in China if it's released there. and James can't risk that. The rest of Hollywood made the same decision many years ago. Used to see, occasionally, movies that criticized the dictatorship of China or took the side of Tibet. Remember Richard Gere? Whatever happened to him? Not anymore. In fact, that's unimaginable. You can't imagine a major Hollywood picture taking the side of Tibet or Hong Kong or the Dalai Lama or human rights in China, the world's largest country. No. Instead, studios now grovel for Chinese funding. And if China appears in films at all, it's always in a positive portrayal. Meanwhile, Russia, which is a completely irrelevant country most of the time, is subverting our democracy. That's what they tell us. This is what corruption looks like. Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports will be weighing in on all this in just a minute. But first tonight, Clay Travis of Fox Sports Radio is the author of the book Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. Apparently, so do Chinese communists. Clay Travis joins us tonight. Clay, thanks so much for coming on tonight. So, I mean, I don't think anyone would have a problem if sports figures wanted to stay out of politics more generally. But James is not wildly political or anything, but he does regularly weigh in on American politics. So do many of them. But the idea of criticizing the fascist government of China is over the line. How does this work?
I think you nailed it. It's all about money, Tucker. And first, thanks for having me on. Second, LeBron James is one of the biggest hypocrites in all of sports. You hit on it. Look, if he had decided to stay out of politics, if the NBA had decided to stay out of politics, they could have dominated by just selling their overall brand of basketball to a market that loves basketball. But the NBA decided it wasn't good enough to be basketball league. They had to be a woke basketball league. And as part of that, they pulled their All-Star game out of Charlotte, North Carolina over a transgender bathroom bill. They took away the word owner and replaced it with the word governor because they decided it was racially insensitive. And that was a conversation that came out of LeBron James's barbershop show. And so this, to me, is a major shot across the bow of the NBA. And I think you hit on something that's really important here in the larger scale. Back in 1997, 20 years ago, when we started taking our movies to China, they were saying, okay, you can play the movie here, but we got to take out 2 minutes. We don't want to offend people inside China. We're going to allow our censorship to play here. Note what's going on with this Daryl Morey tweet. China is not saying to the NBA, hey, play by our rules inside the country. They are saying we expect our rules which govern our country to also go outside the border of the country. And that's massive. And I think why, to the credit of the NBA, they managed to do something that's almost impossible. They got AOC and Ted Cruz to sign a joint letter saying the NBA was intolerable the way they had responded, which at least is an element of bipartisanship. That's how bad the NBA position was here.
But it does seem like we're importing Chinese political values into this country. They're being imposed on us by the people in charge. China is governed increasingly not simply by force. They do still kill their political dissidents there and sell their organs, but most of the time it's governed by a very, very sophisticated, tech-dominated system of social credit. You step out of line, you're punished. Why shouldn't we be terrified of something like that coming here?
We should be. And that's why I think battles like these are so important. Look, LeBron James tried to say, I'm more than an athlete, right? He tried to say, I'm not going to shut up and dribble. That was his market. That's what he's been trying to sell for a long time. He tried to brand himself as the modern-day Muhammad Ali. Well, you talked about the necessity for bravery. It means risking something, money, life, liberty, something. What LeBron James has been willing to do is speak out when there's no cost whatsoever for him. He can call Donald Trump a bum. He can refuse to meet with him, but yet he will go to communist China and he will bow, he will genuflect at the altar of the Chinese communist government. And that is such an inherent hypocrisy. If he wanted to be Muhammad Ali said, I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. He went to battle. He risked his title. He risked his life, his liberty in the United States to fight for something he believed in. LeBron James had an opportunity here, Tucker, and this is what's so disappointing to me. If you want to be political, LeBron James last night had an opportunity to say, you know what? I'm an American. I went from nothing. I've risen to the point where one day I might be a billionaire. That's because America embraces liberty. We embrace human rights. We embrace freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all of these things. And I believe that all of the world, including 1.4 billion people in China, should have the exact same rights that I had as a kid growing up in Akron, Ohio. He didn't say it.
He's too greedy. The left does not get credit for being as greedy as they are. Clinton and Obama, I mean, all of them. Bernie Sanders, they're greed heads. Clay, Travis, great to see you tonight. Thank you.